Hi, everybody. This is the second to last Confirmation Online Trinity 20 for this school year. Congratulations that you've made it to almost the end of the school year for all the craziness that's been going on. Well done. Hope the confirmation stuff hasn't added too much of a burden. We're kind of going to be sending around if you talk with each other. This is the kind of thing that, hopefully you'll have a chance to look at before next fall. But we're going to continue working on the third article of the Apostles' Creed. I believe in the Holy Spirit. And once again, the reminder that basically when we talk about believing in the Holy Spirit, we talk about the kind of bullet point list of things that we can observe in the world around us that lets us know that the Spirit is at work. Like wind, you can't see the Spirit, but you can see what it does. And so today we are on, again, the second to last on those lists. It's I believe in the Holy Spirit, ... the forgiveness of sins. And so we're going to talk, I know we've talked about it before, but considering it's probably one of the foundational concepts of what it means to be a follower of Jesus, we can talk about it some more. So
I think forgiveness is what makes Christianity hard.
And it makes it work. I mean, it makes it also hopeful and filled with grace. But yeah, it is hard.
And so if we're going to talk about forgiveness, okay, let's talk a little bit about what it is not and what it is not and what it is. All right, first of all, forgiveness. Here's what it is not, right? Forgiveness does not mean that you just forget about what happened. All right, forgiveness does not mean that the pain goes away, right? Forgiveness does not mean you make it easier for the offender to hurt you again, right? Forgiveness does not mean there are no consequences. You steal my car, I can forgive you, but you're still probably going to go to jail because you stole a car, right? So forgiveness does not mean consequences go away. It does not mean pain goes away. It does not mean that whatever happened to you doesn't matter anymore, right? That's what it does not mean. Let's talk a little bit about what it does mean. If you think about forgiveness, one way to look at forgiveness is that idea of revenge. Nope, that goes away because forgiveness is not about, if you're going to forgive someone, then this idea of I'll show you, right? That goes away. It's not about forgiveness. Forgiveness is accepting that, whoever it is that hurt you, that there is the possibility that they could change, right? And being, just kind of being open to that. Forgiveness means, well, let me ask you this. Have you ever, maybe it's happened to you, maybe you've seen it in the movie, someone gets hurt. And every day they think about it. And every day they talk about it. And every day about how bad it was and how you'd like to, get a little revenge, right? Well, that forgiveness means setting that aside, right? Not letting it or the person who offended you, right, who hurt you, you're not going to let them control your life anymore. Every day you're not going to let them into your life. You're going to set that aside and get on with your life. I mean, that's what forgiveness is.
And that leads us to what we talked about already. So since forgiveness is such an important concept for those of us that follow Jesus, such an important action that we be willing to forgive, the question is, why? Why does Jesus want us to forgive? Why should we? It is hard. People, there are people who hurt you, and forgiveness does not depend on how much they grovel before you can forgive them, or on them even really learning the lesson, because when we talk about forgiving the way God forgives us, the way Jesus forgives, we're talking about forgiving someone not because they're contrite, not even because they deserve it, but we forgive because God forgives us. That's where the whole cycle of forgiveness starts. That we confess to God when we mess up, we ask for God's forgiveness, and we're forgiven. No strings attached. God doesn't say, well, all right, if you do, 500 good deeds before next week, then I'll forgive you. Now, Jesus hung on the cross and looked at all the people killing him and said, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. So the reason we forgive other people is because God forgives us. Because forgiveness is the only thing that can allow people to change. When we talk about, does somebody deserve forgiveness, or what forgiveness does, it's that whole idea that on any given day, some of us can act like saints or we can act like sinners. We'll go back to the last time. I mean, it may be us at our very worst. We may do something by mistake, or something horrible, or something self-centered because we're having a bad day, or whatever. But there is that underlying concept that God has of us, that we can be so much more than that. And so forgiveness allows us to learn from the horrible things that we do, and then not do them the next day. To learn again. It helps us become more of what we're meant to be, more the saint and less the sinner, because we learn from the times that we mess up, and we lean on the strength of the Holy Spirit not to do it again.
In the past, when we've talked about forgiveness, I'll ask the question, so how many times do you forgive someone? Right? And a lot of times, a lot of kids have those very specific numbers. 0. You cross me, I'm through with you. Sometimes it's a number, just a different number. I've been told 3. You get 3 times. And after 3 times, I'm through with you.
3 strikes and you're
right?
out.
And, it's in the Bible, right? Someone asked Jesus, how many times do I forgive my neighbor? Do I forgive him 7 times? And Jesus says 70 times 7. Now that doesn't mean 490, right? That just means you just keep forgiving, right?
It means the perfect number of times.
There's no, forgiveness doesn't run out. If we're doing it right, it's hard to do it right. If we're doing it right, forgiveness doesn't run out. But now I just got to go back to what I was saying at the start. That doesn't mean you just get back in line to be a punching bag again, right? You just get back in line to get hurt. We learn, right? When we're the ones who are hurt, we learn from it, right? We set it aside. We don't let it, because we forgive, we don't let it control our lives anymore. But, the kid who says 0, you cross me and you're through, right? Well, the obvious question is, so let me ask you, have you ever hurt someone physically, emotionally? Right? Have you ever let someone down? Well, yes. Have you ever, kind of sat back while someone was being picked on? Well, yes. You ever gossiped about someone? Well, yes. Well, so would you not want to be forgiven? Would you want that one mistake to be the thing that describes you for the rest of your life? No, because with forgiveness comes the possibility for change, for growth, for second chance.
It's basically the working verb for what grace does. Grace is forgiving somebody to allow them to become so much more than they are at the worst moment, if you're seeing them at their worst moment. Just like those worst moments that we have, we don't want defining us. We have to then, kind of look at the people who annoy us or who hurt us through Jesus' eyes and say, well, God isn't done with them either. They are not all they are is not what they are being at this moment when they're being so horrible. They could be so much more. And so, yep, Nate's right. You don't let people walk all over you. Sometimes you personally have to just say, I can't be in this relationship anymore. But what we can't say, and when we forgive somebody, it's telling them that we realize that they can be so much more. And that, to even give them kind of that background, that we believe in a God that says we are more than we are at our worst, and we are given forgiveness as the grace to become that other person. The Bible is filled with characters who do some pretty rotten and awful and horrifying things. And yet they're forgiven by God. They're given a chance to do better. And doggone it if they don't do a whole lot better. It goes into the question. We get asked all the time, as we go down this line, well, are there people who can't be forgiven? What about the terrorists from 9/11? What about Adolf Hitler? What about all these horrendous characters throughout history who look for all the world like they lived their whole life being hateful and weren't asking for anybody's forgiveness? Can God really forgive them? And let me direct you back to the story of Jesus on the cross. As the crowds are calling for blood, as everybody turned on him, as the guards are making fun of him and nailing him and basically killing him, he asks for God's forgiveness. He forgives the criminal hanging next to him on the cross because the criminal asks. When we think about a life, and I know it's really hard, to say this, it's hard even to think about, but you take a character from history like Hitler, and we think, well, look at his whole life. He did this horrible thing, and at the end of his life, he wasn't saying he was sorry. He wasn't saying he was wrong. How can God forgive that? Well, on this plane, on Earth, Nate's right. Had he been caught, there are consequences for what he did. He would have to pay them. But the truth is, in God's eyes, for one thing, God's action of loving and forgiving isn't stuck in the parentheses of the day that I am born to the day that I die. God exists way before that, and God exists way after I'm gone. The same is true about Hitler. And if God is the God of all time, who's to say that there's not somewhere down the line that, God, touches Hitler's heart and made a difference? I can't, that's all in God's hands. But we always make the mistake of trying to limit God to our own limits. And that's not fair. The Apostle Paul, who wrote all of the letters in the Bible, like the last huge bunch of books in the New Testament after the first four, started out, he was a murderer. He basically was responsible for the killing of all kinds of Jews of all kinds of Christian Jews as well. And yet, God used him and, turned him around and gave him a whole fresh chance.
And so we talk about everyone can be forgiven, right? So there's someone who's a part of everyone that often gets overlooked. And who can be forgiven? If everyone can be forgiven, like, you can forgive yourself. A lot of people spend a lot of their life, right, kind of feeling like they have to pay a debt for mistakes they've made. right? Because they can't forgive themselves. You know, sometimes that shows up, and sometimes, you know, that shows up in self-harm,
In depression.
depression. Sometimes that shows up in depression. Oh, you know, things like, you know, substance abuse. You know,
escaping from the pain.
You know, you can forgive yourself too. You have to, right? Because, you know, who can carry around that big backpack full of every mistake you've ever made and every time even the big ones, right? Even the big ones. You know, who can carry around that backpack full of those rocks for their whole life? It's just too hard, and it holds you back from being able to forgive. You forgive yourself, you set that backpack down, and then you can work on making the change, right? Then you can take advantage of that second chance and build something from it. So you got to forgive yourself.
And once that's done, as forgiveness abounds, there's no limit to what God can accomplish. You know, sometimes the only way for people to move forward is by forgiving one another, because there's enough harm and hurt in the background that you can't erase it, but you can move forward to go somewhere else. There'll be a bunch of clips underneath this listed that you can go to on YouTube. Lots of clips about forgiveness. There are plenty more if you're interested. Just kind of search around and see what YouTube is saying about forgiveness. But it is pretty much universally agreed on that it is the starting point of anybody becoming better. It is the starting point, forgiveness, of being able to move forward into your own life without carrying this huge bag of rocks that Nate was talking about, that's anger and all of those other things. It helps you move forward. It helps us grow. It helps us be. And it is, like I said, a building block of grace. And so when you see it at work, it's a beautiful thing. And sometimes you see forgiveness abound in places that you go, wow, I can't imagine that somebody could forgive that. And then I want you to be able to sit back and recognize, that's the Holy Spirit at work.
So there.
I think that's what we have to say about forgiveness. So next week we'll get together, we'll finish up the third article of the Creed, and we'll go on from there. I hope you all are enjoying a little bit of the beautiful sunshine, a chance to refresh, a chance to move on, and a chance to be good to yourself and to the people around you, and help us all grow the way we should be. So take care. We'll see ya.